Hello and welcome to World News on the Papyrus Global TV. I am Christiana Babayo. Denmark and Greenland ministers head to White House amid Trump annexation threats. Trump travel ban threatens to empty seats for African teams at World Cup 2026. Uganda deploys military across Kampala ahead of presidential election. Deadly landslide in eastern Congo leaves dozens dead and many missing. President demands massive turnout as Uganda heads to the polls. High-priority probe launched after former Burkina minister is found dead. Ireland pledges new humanitarian aid to Palestinians during Rafah border visit. And now the news info. Denmark and Greenland's foreign ministers are scheduled to meet with US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the White House this week in a high-profile diplomatic engagement as tensions mount over the United States' renewed push to assert influence over Greenland, a strategically located Arctic territory. The meeting, expected to take place on January 14, 2026, aims to address concerns raised by recent US comments about Greenland's status and future. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen, accompanied by Greenlandic Foreign Minister Vivian Motzfeldt, agreed to the talks after initially planning meetings with US officials earlier in the week. The decision to hold the discussion at the White House underscores the high diplomatic stakes as Washington reasserts its long-standing interest in the region's security and resource potential. The context for the talk includes renewed rhetoric for the US President Donald Trump about the strategic importance of Greenland, including suggestions that the United States should deter rival powers from gaining influence there. Both Denmark and Greenland have firmly reaffirmed their sovereign ties and allegiance to Denmark, resisting any notion of US ownership or unilateral control, and emphasized the need for mutually respectful dialogue among allies. Officials from Copenhagen and Nuuk have stressed that while cooperation with the United States is welcome, Greenland's autonomy and Danish governance remain non-negotiable, even as global interest in the Arctic's mineral and geopolitical value grows. The White House meeting is expected to test whether the parties can ease tensions and define a shared path forward on Arctic security and international collaboration. Supporters of Senegal and Ivory Coast's national football teams have been left in uncertainty over plans to attend the 2026 FIFA World Cup in the United States after the Trump administration expanded a travel ban affecting several African countries. The restrictions, announced in December 2025, bar entry into the United States for nationals of certain countries unless they already hold visas, even though the US is co-hosting the tournament with Canada and Mexico. The ban does not affect players, officials, and immediate relatives who are permitted entry to participate in the event, but it does apply to ordinary supporters, many of whom were hopeful of traveling to the US to back their teams. Senegal qualified for a group stage game at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey starting June 16, while Ivory Coast matches are also scheduled in US cities, leaving fans uncertain about how or whether they can attend. Fans at the Africa Cup of Nations in Morocco expressed disappointment and confusion about the situation, saying that many cannot secure US visas or fear missing the tournament altogether. Supporters and civil society groups have urged US authorities to reconsider the ban in light of the global nature of the World Cup and the tradition of fans traveling internationally to support their teams. Uganda's capital, Kampala, has seen an increased military and security forces deployment in the run-up to the January 15, 2026 general election, a move framed by authorities as necessary to maintain peace and deter violence, but criticized by opposition groups and rights advocates as heavy-handed and intimidating. Soldiers and armored vehicles have been visible in major parts of the city days before voters go to the polls, with troops on the streets and mobile patrols coordinated with police to secure key election routes and public spaces. The Uganda Communications Commission also ordered a temporary mobile internet suspension just before voting, citing misinformation and potential for violence as justification, a decision that has sparked concern among civic groups over transparency and access to information during the election period. President Yoweri Museveni, Africa's long-serving leader seeking a seventh term, also defended the security posture, saying the deployments are intended to prevent election-related unrest. The government has played up its assessment for potential threats from certain political actors and supporters, even as critics question whether the use of military forces in urban zones could suppress dissent or discourage voter turnout. The election, which includes both presidential and parliamentary contests, features Museveni in power since 1986 against opposition figures including musician-turned-politician Bobi Wine. Recent campaigning has been marked by heightened tensions, sporadic clashes between supporters and security forces, and contentious rhetoric from both sides. At least 13 people have been confirmed dead after a landslide struck the village of Burutsi in the Walikale territory of North Kivu province in the Democratic Republic of Congo early on Tuesday, January 13th, with authorities warning that more than 30 people are still unaccounted for as search efforts continue. The disaster, triggered by intense overnight rainfall, buried homes and cut off critical road links, including the main roads between Goma and the provincial capital Walikale, complicating rescue operations and isolating affected communities. Local officials describe how the hillside collapsed into the village around 1 a.m., catching many residents while they were asleep. So far, rescue teams and residents have recovered the bodies of 13 victims, including several children, but ongoing rain and unstable terrain are complicating efforts to find survivors or retrieve the missing. Heavy rain-related landslides are a recurring hazard in the region, particularly during peak rainy periods, and this latest event has intensified humanitarian concerns in an area already grappling with conflict, displacement, and food insecurity. Local authorities and community volunteers are leading search and recovery operations, but the collapse of the road network complicates access for emergency services and aid agencies. Officials have appealed for external assistance to help manage the crisis and support families of the victims. We will now go on a short break, and when we come back, the news will continue. Stay tuned.
The Papyrus Global, we don't just cover events, we create cinematic experiences. From red carpets to birthdays, gala dinners, and your fairy tale weddings, we bring your moments to life with high-tech precision. Our gadgets are smarter, our lenses sharper, and our team simply world-class. Trust the Papyrus Global to tell your story in the boldest, brightest way possible.
Welcome back, and now the news will continue. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has called on voters to participate actively in the country's general elections scheduled for Thursday, emphasizing the importance of peaceful engagement in choosing national leadership. Museveni made the appeal during a final campaign rally in Kampala, where thousands of supporters gathered ahead of the contest that will determine both the presidency and the composition of parliament. Museveni, who has led Uganda since 1986 and is seeking a seventh term in office, urged citizens to exercise their constitutional right to vote and contribute to the nation's democratic process. The event marked the culmination of a 3-month election campaign season, with voters across about 21.6 million registered expected at polling stations to cast ballots for presidential and legislative candidates, while Museveni's ruling National Resistance Movement NRM projects confidence and a strong base of support. Opposition figures, including musician-turned-politician Bobi Wine, have also held rallies urging voter turnout and political change, particularly among Uganda's large youth population. The prosecutor's office in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, has launched an investigation into the murder of a former government minister whose body was discovered in her home on January 10, 2026, authorities confirmed. The victim, Vivian Yolande Kampore, served in key ministerial roles under the late President Blaise Compaoré, including as Minister of Transport and Tourism and later as Minister of Regional Integration. Police found Campore's lifeless body in her residence in the Kampala neighborhood of the capital, prompting immediate criminal proceedings by the Ouagadougou High Court prosecutor. Initial findings indicate that the former minister was attacked and killed inside her home, with forensic and investigative teams combining the scene for evidence and possible leads. Prosecutors have appealed to the public for witness information that could aid identification and apprehension of the perpetrators and any accomplices. The appeal underscores the seriousness with which authorities view the slaying and the priority placed on ensuring accountability for the crime. Ireland has announced a significant new humanitarian funding package for Palestinians, with its Minister of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Defense, Helen McEntee, pledging substantial assistance during a visit to the Egyptian side of the Rafah border crossing with Gaza. The announcement was made on January 13, 2026, as Mercante toured the key entry point used for relief and medical evacuations into the besieged enclave. During the visit, Mercante confirmed that Ireland will allocate 49 million US dollars, about 42 million euros in humanitarian aid to Palestinians in 2026, an increase over its 2025 support. A large portion of this funding, approximately 20 million euros, is earmarked as core funding for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees, which provides essential services such as healthcare, education and shelter to refugees in Gaza, the West Bank and across the region. The Rafah crossing is Gaza's only humanitarian gateway not shared with Israel, making it a vital corridor for aid deliveries amid ongoing shortages of food, shelter, clean water and medical supplies following years of conflict. And that's all we have on the news update on Papyrus Global TV. I am Christiana Barbayo. Thanks for joining us.